We're just dying to get going, dying to get into this. Our favorite topic.
Our favorite topic.
One of our favorites.
Okay, we kick off. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to our first Insight seminar for the spring semester. We'll do quick introductions. I'm Gavin Connell and my colleague Brendan Lally.
How you doing?
The topic we're going to cover today is how to negotiate your graduate salary. I suppose in a lot of ways, both myself and Brendan have a background in recruitment, working in American multinationals, and we've been in the careers world then, oh God, I wanted to say how long, but this generally, long time, right? So generally speaking, this is one of the questions we'll see come in as part of consultations or just general queries. How do I start this, or can I negotiate a graduate salary? What does that look like? So I kind of thought it would be good and just do a quick session, which is right. Okay, it is being recorded. We will share the slides and everything later as well. So feel free as we go along. If you have any questions, just drop it into the chat function and Brendan will moderate them. So if he feels like they're appropriate to ask as we go along, he will. If not, we'll leave them at the end. If we have time, we will respond to them then as well. Okay, so.
Oh man.
Okay, actually, yeah, and if you can just mute your mics as well, that would be very helpful. Thanks very much. Okay, so just moving on. Okay, so what we're going to cover off today is firstly, just knowing your worth in the graduate jobs market. When is money discussed as part of that whole interview recruitment process? Probably the one that we see a lot in relation to gaps, we'll say, in knowledge, right? Okay, is the next one, which is knowing the difference between salary and a compensation remuneration package. We'll talk a small bit about what that looks like. Knowing when you can negotiate, knowing what you can negotiate are probably really important as well. And then probably kind of closing out on know what you both agreed to, right? Okay, and I say both as being used, the individual and then the organization, and then making sure that writing is in offer, that nothing is kind of left out, and to ensure that you're both agreeing where that moves forward. And then we're just going to cover a small bit around short-term versus long-term strategy. I think it's important that you're kind of clear of where you sit in relation to that kind of jobs market and future. Okay, so just kicking off. So generally speaking, knowing your worth in the graduate jobs market, okay? So the amount of students, if I was to say a pulse survey of what do you think you're worth? And you'll get everything from I don't know to I'm worth 20,000, I'm worth 40,000, I'm worth 70,000, right? Okay. So the truth is that lies somewhere in all of those figures, but that becomes a very personal experience for yourself, right? Okay, because it depends where you are from an undergrad perspective or your postgrad. Have you finished a PhD? Are you a returner to work or to education? So maybe you have lots of experience. You've come back as a mature student or just upskilling, whatever the case is. So you in that market is very important for you to understand. Okay, and the first part of that, what we would say is generally there is an enormous amount of salary surveys that are done on an annual basis. Your careers advisors will have an enormous amount of data for you, but also then you can go out, speak to your peers, speak to individuals that you may know who have graduated last year and just have a benchmark of those in a particular industry. Well, how much is that salary looking like, or what should I expect? There are also online salary guides in relation to CPL does one. Morgan McKinley does one, right? Okay, and it breaks it down into the graduate right up to senior management across multiple different sectors as well. So there's no shortage of data from that perspective.
Just to add yet another one, Gavin, I suppose Glassdoor would be a good resource.
Yeah. And actually, the Glassdoor also then talks about the candidate experience as well. So it's very helpful from that perspective. Yeah. Okay. So here's something we kind of, now I just threw in these figures of 22 to 25. That's not to get you thinking that's where you should be, because as I said, there's peaks and troughs in all salaries, right? Okay. But when you start to move into understanding expectations, right? Okay, you have to be realistic of your expectations. But if you think that you're within a salary band, and you'll hear myself and Brendan talking about bands probably for the rest of this session, right? Okay, we don't necessarily pinpoint a specific salary and say that's what you should be on, because generally every recruiter or organization will have a band that they're working in. Some of them are very fixed, some are very flexible, some of them depends on the sector that you're going into, right? Okay, so if you have salary expectations of somewhere between 22 and 25, this is just the first conversation that you have in relation to your own expectations. If you say at least 22, that's what they're going to offer you, okay? Where
Yep.
if you say 25,000, if that's your band, well, and you're talking about your ideal salary, you talk it's around 25,000 when you're asked by recruiters, that gives you a bit of bandwidth now to start to be able to negotiate in a sense, right? Okay. But if you start on the low end, that's what you'll be offered. Okay. That's as simple as that. I don't think I need to talk way too much more about that, but that's just simple negotiation 101, right? Okay. You have to be able to understand where you sit within that. Okay.
I will say, Gavin, I suppose not to make people nervous that look at you're going into a hard ball negotiation. It's going to come at you as part of your process. Gavin mentions, I suppose myself and Gavin come from the US multinational sector. Your big brands will have all of this down pat. You know, they'll have done their benchmarking with competitors. They'll have their market data. And you know they have their pay band fixed, you know, from last year. They know what this year based on inflation, etc. And you know there may be no negotiation. It might be, you know, this is the pay for the graduate level. However, I suppose would it be fair to say, Gavin, you know, your SMEs may not have, you know, maybe a HR function perhaps,
Yeah.
and there might
Or it
be a bit
might
more,
be outsourced as well, Brendan.
yeah,
Yeah.
a bit more fluidity there. And, you know, that's where, you know, they might be hiring their first graduate, which would be a classic case of what will we pay? And they don't have the fancy consultants going out and doing benchmarking. So, you know, they probably, if they have somebody in a similar field, will do a kind of a quick check. But to Gavin's point, the onus is on you then to have your data done so that you know if they're offering something that's on par with the market.
Yeah.
I think
And we'll find actually many of those organizations will come back to ourselves and say, can you give us some data on what's going on within the IT sector, engineering, languages, accountancy, whatever the case is, and we will provide that data. And this probably is a good lead on to where we are going next, right? Okay, so some of that for yourselves, right? Okay, is we take the graduate outcomes. So every year we do the graduate outcomes. We publish the data, okay, and within that there is a significant amount of data on the average salaries depending on the course that you've studied, depending on the level you've gone to, depending on the region, either it be within Ireland or abroad, whatever. Okay, so there's an enormous amount of data there. Okay, second part of that then as well, and here's a link, you can go off and investigate that for yourselves, right? Okay, quite interactive reports from that perspective, right? So the second part that we would do is the graduate market survey, which is an employer perspective. We do it every year. We get about 300 to 400 responses from employers, and they are across the range, to Brendan's point, large multinationals, indigenous organizations, your SMEs, your small, medium enterprise organization, even single kind of sole traders respond to these surveys for us. And in this, they will give us their salary expectations. Now where we can, in this, we will break it down into as the sectors where we can, but equally we've broken it down, and I think I have it here. Yeah, I've broken it down based on undergrad, master's, PhD. It is really important to remember here, these are averages because there are peaks and troughs, right? Okay. But generally speaking, you can see that there is an increase coming on across the salaries. From 2020 to 21, we see an increase that your undergrad salary average 28,575 up from 28,000, kind of more or less 28,000. Masters has come up from 31 to 32, and the PhD has seen the biggest jump from 31, which is just 32,000 up to 34,600. So that's just some of the data that's in there, but I would say educate yourself and really get to understand where you are within that market. And it comes back to our first slides. It's about leveling the playing field in the sense of your expectations. If you know what you're worth, it makes for an easier conversation. Okay, moving on. Okay, so when is the money discussed? Okay, so typically at the offer stage, right? Okay, definitely at graduate recruitment, it is at that offer stage, or maybe one at the kind of general question at the end of an interview of what would be your salary expectations. If it's an experienced hire, Okay. Generally speaking, that happens very early in the conversation because really you don't really want to be wasting each other's times. Like, you know, if I'm coming in with 10 to 15 years experience, you're offering me 70 grand, my expectation is 80. Don't bring me through the process, you're wasting my time, because I'm not going to move from my current organization, right? Where at a graduate, they're kind of going, we have set the band, we understand where we sit within it, right? Okay. And we'll ask that question and sometimes it's not that they're looking to scare you away by asking that question. They just want to get a sense of, do you have a good sense of you within that market? That link that we have here, negotiating the salary package, has really good language around how you respond to those kind of questions, because sometimes it's not, you know, it might be asked, right, give me an example of a competency around teamwork, or give me an example of a time you had to deal with conflict. And the following question might be, what would be your salary expectations? And you're kind of thrown a small bit because you're kind of going, oh, I didn't expect that question, or oh my God, what should I say? Really nice kind of language in that that blog that they have online, right, Kate? So there's no point us repeating it ourselves, but some really nice stuff there. But it breaks it down into that, talking about your value, your worth, and really, if I was to give you advice and just kind of call it out as being, you would say something along the lines of, I've done my research, I'm aware of your organization, and you're talking about how you still want to join our organization, that you've seen all of the benefits in a way, not, and I don't mean benefits in the sense of money, I'm talking about training and development, it's the industry that they're in, they're the leaders, and that you have researched the market and your understanding is that this type of role would sit within this band, somewhere between, I don't know, 20, and don't do a band of 20 to 40,000. That's just too wide a band. You need to be kind of in that space of a band of about 25 to 30, 20 to 25. So you understand that the band is within that 5,000. And then you would then talk about yourself and say, based on the degree I've done, based on the work experience that I have, based on co-op or part-time or the upskilling I've done, I believe I would be at the upper end of that band. So you're still selling them, but you're actually trying to tell them that you're the best candidate from that perspective.
Another suggestion I often give, Gavin, is to maybe wrap it up with a compliment for the company. You know, it's kind of a backhanded compliment where you would say, this is the band or the bracket I've researched, you know, for a graduate of my background, and I'm sure a company of your stature would, you know, equal, if not better, that, and I would be happy with that. So that you would equal or better that, and I would be happy with that. You know, so either or, it's all wording at the end of the day.
So if I was to summarize this slide, the important thing is just be ready. Don't be thinking that the negotiation happens after you've done your first or second round interview. It could happen in the middle of it. It's not always. It's not a general thing that happens, but definitely I would think in the SMEs they might say to you as part of the interview. They have a quicker process on their recruitment anyway, right? Okay, than the larger organizations. So just be ready for those kind of conversations and have that language ready for yourself, right? Okay, so knowing the difference between salary and compensation remuneration packages, right? Okay, so is it just my take-home pay after tax? I will say to you, it's really important to understand that when a salary, and I know a lot of people will probably have had done placement, do you understand the tax system in the country? But if it's your first time into a working environment, we have had some anecdotal stories from employers who've said that the students or the graduates at that stage have come to them and thought that somebody had made a mistake in their first salary because the tax man had decided to take his cut of it, right? Okay, so just be very mindful of that. There's everything from revenue, who's going to take a cut out of your salary, what does that look like from yourself, right? Okay, what kind of tax rate you be on, all those kind of things. So just be mindful of those things. But when we think about the salary versus compensation, here are probably the other things that a lot of people wouldn't be aware of that comes as part of a remuneration package. Okay, so the first thing is your contract type. So is it a permanent contract? Is it part-time contract? Is it a fixed term contract? Whatever. So with that there's comfort in it. It also helps you then if you're ever applying. I mean, here's the death knell, right? If you're ever applying for a mortgage, if you have a full-time permanent role, it has serious amount of credit to you from taking loans, all that kind of stuff. Where if you're in a
Providing
part-time,
you're past your probation period.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's really strong bargaining stuff outside of your workplace. Many organizations, right? Okay, while their salary might be at a set stage, they will say, actually, if you're working overtime, we'll pay you for the overtime, right? Okay, or it could be you can take that time in lieu, right? Okay, we let you take that time during the summer. You can amass a certain amount of leave, and that has its value. After, and I would say most of this stuff is after you pass your probation. Okay, that they all kick in. Some of the large multinationals kick in day one, but a lot of the others maybe not.
Just the length of probation, Gavin. I mean, 6 months is average.
Yeah. But they will also then put in a caveat as part of contracts that if there's any issues, they're allowed to extend that by another 9 months, but no longer than the 9 months, right? Okay. Further study, if you want to go off and do further study, don't go in the first day and say, can I do a master's? Okay, you have to be there a while, you have to build up credibility, and you have to build up profile before.
Or should you say it at the interview? Or
exactly.
they mightn't be so hot thinking that you're just coming in for a year or two and heading off again. There's probably a way to manage that discussion, as Gavin said, not at the early stage. Do we want to elaborate on that point, Gavin?
No, that's fine. No, it's fine.
Yeah,
just kind of wait until they'll say it to you is what I would say, right? Okay. Pension. Okay, so a lot of grads are in that kind of early 20s. They're thinking pension. That's
no
40 years away. Okay, if you're in an organization that has a pension, you will, when you hit 50s, 55s, right? Okay, and you're saying I could retire early here because I've had a pension since I was 20. The value. Talk to your parents about pensions. They'll tell you if you're getting an organization that has a pension, and sometimes it can be is that they will pay a certain amount into the pension for you. If you do a percentage match, that's around 2 or 3% of your salary, they'll increase it again by that amount. Our advice would be, if you get an organization with a pension, boom, go for it, right? Healthcare, like your VHI, your I can't think of the other brands, right? Okay,
yeah,
all kind of stuff. So healthcare, if you're to go out as an individual and get healthcare, you're talking about 500-600 euros a piece. Okay, some of them will actually do family policies as well. Okay, so worth its weight in gold, as it were. There can be things from stock options that vest as the years go by, as your performance goes on. Bonuses related to your performance, but also the organization. The ability to be able to do flexi and hybrid. So while the last 2 years has shown us that a lot of working opportunities can actually be done from a remote perspective because they had to be, there's no surety that that's going to happen into the future. Okay, so when an organization is offering flexi and hybrid, that is a bonus. Don't just consider it to be, oh, that's a definite. It doesn't always happen. Okay, so that's important. Everything from gym, paid leave, right? Okay, company car, depending on the organization. My only thing I'd say to you about a company car is sometimes it is important to remember that you will be paying benefit in kind on a company car. Okay, and it's and if you don't do the mileage related to what the revenue is looking for, it can be a significant bill. So really know what the car is being used for, because great, yeah, I got this company car, it's fantastic, but it could be a costly exercise as well. Okay,
and it's, as Gavin said, company car is only for positions where you'd have client visits, for example, or in a sales capacity. Any other role, unlikely.
Everything from commission, depending on if the role you're in, sales, whatever, mobile phone, laptop, any other devices generally come. Be careful of those, because then you're contactable at all times as well. Okay. Some of the larger companies do free food, retail discount vouchers, cycle to work schemes that they'll support that. It's available as part of a revenue thing, that you get your bike at whatever discount of tax rate you are currently on, but not every organization supports it. So if you get one, it's good. There's things like well-being initiatives, volunteering days. So I suppose
the well-being, sorry, Gavin, can include maybe some financial advice. I mean, the big organizations, there's so much support. That's not an exhaustive list. There's probably other things there that we could add in.
Yeah. So I think what we want to talk about, the salary and the compensation, there's lots of different things that can come that are not just take-home pay. And they're all things when you're thinking about a package It's the full package, not just what am I going to earn at the end of a 2-week period or a month, depending on where you're paid. These are all things that feed into it, right? Okay, from that perspective.
And these mothering companies don't just give you a black and white sheet with a salary figure anymore. They'll give you kind of a brochure, which would be a benefit statement. Because I suppose you can remember too, Gavin, when it was just the salary figure, and a lot of candidates would be kind of going, is that it? And that, I suppose, from a company's point of view, wasn't the full picture. The company, as Gavin said, is paying for all of these things. So now your mothering company will have a benefit statement, and they'll jot up, the final cost for all of these, and you'll see your salary, and then you'll see all the other extras. And I suppose it is a better picture. It's more realistic picture you're getting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks, Brent. Okay, so no, do you want to jump in here, Brent, do this one?
Yep, yeah. So know when you can negotiate. There are some employers that are tricky to approach with graduate salary negotiations. They may have a set salary structure and therefore be unwilling to negotiate on their remuneration levels. Certainly, as myself and Gavin mentioned, your big brands will have very much set figures. However, other companies deliberately offer less than they are prepared to pay in hope that the candidate accepts the offer. In reality, they may be willing to pay a higher amount if asked. And I think Gavin has given good wording around that, and there's a link as well, just how to phrase things and make sure that you're not shortchanging yourself. When negotiating directly with the employer, you should consider whether the role has been advertised at a set level, whether your experiences are in line with the requirements, and whether the salary appears to be the market rate for the area. If, after you've assessed it, the offer is in line with your expectations, it is better to accept it. However, if this is not the case, then you can begin by asking if the offer is negotiable and state your ideal salary at that point. So very good advice there in relation to the path through negotiation.
Okay, so knowing what you can negotiate, right? Okay, so myself and Brendan have thought about this for quite a long time, right? Okay,
yeah,
not much, to be honest, right? Okay, generally speaking, it's your uniqueness and your experience brings the ability to negotiate later in your career. Okay, so at I'm only talking about at a graduate level here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about kind of those with the kind of higher level of experience, because that's where that kind of uniqueness, the experience that helps you bring in that conversation. But within the kind of bands at early grad level, right? Okay, they generally have a sense of what that looks like. So you can't really come in and say, well, my friend is getting 50 grand off ABC company. They go, okay, that's just outside where we can actually afford to actually pay. Thanks very much. Good luck now. And you're going, Jesus, that was a risk I was taking, and now I've lost the opportunity. Yeah, so you have to be very clear about that, right?
Yeah, and as I think we've mentioned before, you do not come in at the first interview when they at the end of the interview ask you, is there any questions? And you start saying, will you pay for my gym? Will you, is there this, is there that? What can you do for me? That's a red flag and will, can sink your opportunity. So you have to be very measured, and it's all about time and Gavin, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I suppose we were saying, okay, there are two areas that you can probably negotiate. Okay, one of them is around the flexi hybrid. Okay, so let me kind of maybe talk about the flexi hybrid for the time being, right? Okay, so you could be, and it does pull into the second one, which is around city versus country rates, right? Okay, and I'll give you an example of these. So you may be based in Limerick, but it's called nearshoring, or sorry, it was called nearshoring before COVID. And what nearshoring was before is that there's a significant issue getting accommodation in Dublin. Okay, so a lot of the large organizations, even a lot of the accountancy, consultancy firms and stuff like that, were happy for staff to be living in Galway, Cork, Limerick, wherever the case is, and you were actually had Dublin clients, right? Okay, you might travel up 1 day, 2 days, but most of the time you were based outside of the capital, right? Okay, called nearshoring, right? So when COVID came along, right? Okay, well, that just changed the whole of everything, right? Okay, so it was 100% remote. Yeah. Okay, so that flexi hybrid. So while you might be thinking, oh, the salary might be a bit low, you have to remember, relevant to where you're living, Right, okay, that's the important thing, because you might know somebody who's moved to Dublin and they're on 5 grand, 10 grand more than you are, but actually their costs, the kind of living
huge.
where they are, is probably time and a half more than yours, okay, based on rent, all that kind of stuff. So these are really important. The flexi hybrid is something that you see the value of it, right, okay, and do understand that it's not a God-given kind of right in a way. It's more that's the employer's kind of giving you a bit of kind of flex in that space, right? And that's not something that's just given, it's something that's kind of earned in a way. The other one then, which is around city versus country rates, right? Okay, and I was actually talking to a recruiter who works in the area of recruitment, right? And that Dublin rates are much more higher. They're about 15 grand more for a recruitment consultant than they are outside of Dublin, okay? Problem with that is that during COVID, a lot of people were actually moving to that space of, I'm going to take the Dublin rate, I'll work for Dublin clients, but they were based in Limerick. Now that COVID, I'm not saying it's over, but now things are being, restrictions are being let up. They're being asked now to come back to Dublin 1-2 days a week to meet clients face to face. And now they have an additional cost that they didn't have for the 2 years. Either be
Hotels,
travel, hotel, all that kind of stuff. So while they're negotiable, be careful that you don't get caught up from the wrong side of it, if that makes sense. Okay, so
and you'll see that city country rate displayed in the salary surveys I've put in. Some of the agencies in the chat room there, they'll have Dublin rates for salaries and they'll have regional rates. There's a question here: does employees have any query as to why probation continues from 6 to 9 months, presumably also a situation where an employer insists on renewing contract? Yeah, I mean, Paul, thanks for the question. Yeah, this is employment law we're kind of getting into here, but if your performance isn't up to the agreed standard, it'll be communicated. And there's something called a PIP, a performance improvement plan, that is likely to be implemented to give you every opportunity to meet it. And that's when they'll extend it. And at that point, they'll say, obviously, you haven't fulfilled the criteria to pass the probation, so we're extending it at that point. But yes, you will get communication, and that's a part of the
can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Maybe just to clarify, not you, but just something I'd said earlier on. It's not like, it's not like, Paul, that you would get to the end of 6 months and then just say, oh, we're extending it by 9 months. That would be a regular conversation you would be having with your manager, like probably every month, talking about your performance, how you're settling in. So they would flag this well in advance, or should say, they should. If you got to 6 months and they say we're extending it, you could call foul on that and say, but there was been no communication about my performance. That's unacceptable. Okay, and you could challenge that, to be honest with you, right? Okay, so that's where you would have a very structured organization who's giving you the feedback, and I would say it's always positive feedback, because they're helping you to get into that performance that they're looking for your benefit from that perspective as well. So it's not that I would say that they would just kind of kidnap you in the middle of the night and say, oh, by the way, we're extending it, because that would be wrong, and it would be, I would think, very unprofessional. Okay, so yeah.
And then we don't want to over concern people either. We're talking about, the minority rather than majority here.
Yeah. I suppose just to kind of finish on this one, when we said around negotiate, not much in relation to being negotiate. So the salary is something that's not a fixed point, but all of the other remunerations that I spoke about, this is what I'm talking about in negotiation. If you went and say, oh, I don't really need healthcare, can you give me the 600 euros of my salary? They're not going to do that. That's what we're talking, just to clarify. There's set things that they buy, we'll call it, they buy in bulk for the full employee experience, and they're not going to say, Gavin wants one thing, Brendan wants the other, so we'll kind of cherry pick. Everybody gets the healthcare, everybody gets the gym, everybody gets whatever it is, the free food. So there are things that are just in place that they do as an employee experience as part of remuneration, but it's not that you can cherry pick from that perspective. Okay, so now what you both agreed on has to be in writing in the offer. Okay, so once you're finished negotiating, get the offer in writing, submit your acceptance in writing, and it's really important that you do actually reply to them and tell them that you're accepting the offer, right? Okay. If there's something that you've agreed that's not in it, it's okay to go back and say to them, that what we agreed, because a recruiter is different to the person who's running comps and benefits. Okay, so the recruiter is there to get you in the door. Okay, the comps and benefits person looks after the contract, making sure you get set up as an employee, and you want to make sure that that message that comes from the recruiter, what you agreed, gets moved into comps and benefits. That's okay to always go back and just clarify. But we mentioned this, we agreed this, and then that'll get fixed. Don't leave it until you're in the door and say, I never got what was agreed, because they'll say, well, the contract was done. Okay. If you don't reach an agreement and turn down a job, I would always say send a letter of appreciation, okay, or a note of appreciation. And it's always about, I'm very interested in working in the company with you, okay, because the amount, and I had a kind of slot or an image at the very start around that kind of hidden jobs market, the amount of jobs that I have offered to people based on they didn't get the first job that we were looking for, just may not have been a good match, or maybe just a salary just was at pitch at the wrong area. And 2 months down the road, a job comes up that I think is absolutely perfect for that person at the right salary. I would go back out and I would contact that person because they had done this. I'm very interested. I really want to be kept in the loop of any further opportunities that are in that space of the kind of the range or the experience I'm looking for. Where if you don't agree with what they're offering you, and you kind of leave with a bit of a sour touch and say, no, I'm not interested, they're not going to contact you. They're not going to come back begging you. They'll find somebody else. Trust me on that. So
can I jump in,
yeah,
Gavin?
yeah.
Just a thought on that. That's an excellent point. If your feedback and you're unsuccessful, as Gavin says, for the position, but the feedback is very positive, it's a two-way street. Your average recruiter in a big company will have multiple openings at the same time. So don't rely on the fact that they'll remember you, or remember, even to Gavin's point, to reach out. So especially if you've gotten very positive feedback but unsuccessful, you see the job come up 9 months later, you're still interested, drop an email and remind the recruiter that, you were number 2 or your follow-up, and the conversation at the time was to get back in touch. I've spotted a job. I'm just wondering, can I resubmit my CV? Would that be fair enough, Gavin? Yeah, just to remind.
Sure.
Now, you would think with modern IT systems that all of these flags would be automated, but again, things can fall between two stools. So do sure. Reach back. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So short term versus your long term strategy. Okay. So I think when we were talking about this one, right? Okay, this is really important to know where you are as part of this conversation, right? Okay. So when we're talking about that kind of salary, the remuneration package, if you're coming into and when I mean short term could be is, look, I just want to get some experience for a year because I'm planning to travel and I just need to get some cash, or I'm actually thinking of coming into further study and I just don't have the cash or the funding at the moment. I'm going to work for a year in this industry and I'm going to do further study. Okay, so that's short term. So you're not necessarily looking at, how much training that the organization can give you. You're just kind of in for that kind of short, in 1 year, 2 years, moving on, right? Okay. I would always say to you, you have to be very careful in that space, because that organization, you could fall in love with it in a sense, right? Okay, you still want to do your further study, still want to do your travel, but always think the long term, because you may leave that company to go back and upscale or travel and come back to them. Okay, so you have to be very mindful, right? Okay, of, are you just in it for the sharp buck? Great, but maybe you're not. Maybe you haven't realized that actually the short term that you think you want becomes a longer term, but there's a gap in between it, that gap year, right? Okay, so I would say to you, it's really important in that space, right? Okay, to know where you are, what the short term versus the long term strategy is, right? Okay, I also think, and Brendan reminded me this yesterday, right? Okay, when you're in an interview, you're never going to tell them I'm only taking it for a year, or I plan to go, I plan to do further study, because they'll just say, no, I'm not interested in that.
Reverse out very quickly. Yeah.
So sometimes, right? Okay, I think to close out on this one, right? Okay, I think the important part here is that if you understand your expectations from a salary, and there's all of those other things, not just the kind of the compensation package, but there's also the other stuff around the culture of that organization that you want to work for. There is a thing around how quickly you can upskill. What is the kind of career progression like within it, right? Okay, so is it that you're never going to walk into an organization and be running it in 5 years, but it could be that you can see a clear trajectory of promotional opportunities. They're not always guaranteed because it is based on performance, but that there is a clear trajectory? Or is it that it's very flat? You know, you're coming in on a salary and you're happy to do that, and it's going to remain like that for 5 years before you leave to go to somewhere else, or somebody retires and there's an opportunity from that perspective. Okay. Brendan, I don't know if you have anything else on that.
Well, I was just going to have will we have a word on job hopping, not to get off the point, but you might be sitting there thinking, see if I don't like it, and I'm 5 months in, 8 months in, you know, what damage potentially would it do for me to up sticks and move on? So there's no hard and fast answer to that, but we'll give you some, I suppose, Gavin, you can jump in as well. We'll give some thoughts on it. The company won't be too impressed, let's be honest, if you leave very, very early. They've done a rigorous recruitment process. They've turned away a number of people. They've offered, they've put mentors in place, a training plan in place for you, not to mention all the other stuff that we've shown previously. They're not going to be too impressed. Okay. However, Irish employment law has freedom of movement, you know, for better economic opportunity. So you're not breaking any laws. Unless now, you know, I'm thinking more experienced candidates back in the day, where there might be some clauses on moving to a competitor. Other than that, you have freedom of movement. But, and this is the but, when you go for interview again, it's on the CV, and you will have to explain it, especially if you do it more than once. Any thoughts on that, Gavin?
Yeah, I know. I think I'd agree with you, right? Okay. There was, I think it was around between 2006 and 2009 that it would seem to be okay to do a lot of job hunting or job hopping and stuff like that. And then a lot of employers got really annoyed about it, right? Okay, really, really annoyed, and they really interrogated why we only there for 2 years, what happened, whatever the case is. So I think with definitely in the grad space, right? Okay, they're looking for that investment of time with you. Okay, they're not necessarily looking for you to be with them for the rest of your life. Okay, but they are thinking that there's a 1 to 3 year kind of commit, in a sense that you'll be around with them. Now, unless they're saying that this is a 1 year contract and that's it. But sometimes we all know 1 year contracts extend and extend and extend, right? Okay. But equally be careful not to get caught into just extensions of a 1 year contract. You're always looking for the permanency if you can, if that's what you're looking, you know, that would be the preferred state, is that you're in a permanent role because you have more security, tenure, all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, on the whole, they're looking for people who are going to commit for 1 to 3 years, is what I would think, right? Okay, yeah.
And just, I think we were chatting about this yesterday, Gavin, similar to the probation important date that's on the horizon. If your contract is due to finish in a number of months, let's say 3 months, and nobody has flagged anything with you, raise it yourself, okay? And then don't raise it with 2 weeks to go, because they say, yeah, it is finishing, and you maybe were harboring some hope that it was going to be renewed and extended because you saw colleagues or someone in another department it happened to. Do it good and early, flag it, have the conversation at least 3 months out. And if they say, no, Brendan, you know, the budget isn't there to renew, you've been an excellent performance, we'll give you an excellent reference, but we won't be able to extend it. At least you know, and you have the time to go job search, and that can take a couple of months, you know. So just a point to make there. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, so just finally, things to consider. You receive an offer but are waiting for either a better offer or a preferred company. Okay, so this is when you're balancing a couple of different offers out there. So how long do you keep the original company waiting? Okay, we would say, generally speaking, they will tell you that they want a response by
X
amount of time. Okay, I think it's important that they're looking to close that opportunity, move it onto the next one. They're just I'm not saying they're just processing numbers, but at that stage they just want to make sure Gavin's in, happy out. We're still waiting for Brendan's reply, whatever the case is.
They're unlikely to let that offer hang, Gavin, you know, indefinitely. I would say a week, 10 days. Certainly it'll unlikely roll over into the next month. So the clock is ticking.
Yeah. So I would think on that one, it's really important that you're upfront with the other company and say, I have an offer from this organization. I really want to be able to see what your offer is before I make a decision, because if I commit to the first one, I would feel wrong decommitting somewhere down the road, right? Okay, and that puts the onus back on the second employer to actually up their game in the sense of the offer and whatever that might look. And equally, even being very professional in that space around it, as opposed to please let me have a job with you, that you're actually saying that I have an offer. They know it's a competitive market and they know that somebody else is interested. That's a very strong bargain and negotiating team.
Yeah, and as a recruiter that has several jobs on their table, they'll know that they have to move on you quick. So, you know, you get an offer quicker by flagging these things, to Gavin's point.
For sure. Every offer is subject to a successful reference check. We are aware of many students who get offers rescinded, right, okay, for many different reasons, right, okay. One can be transcript. I said to them I was going to get a 2-1. I didn't. They just rescind the offer. That's just the way some organizations are. Some of it could be is they go and do a social media check, okay. They have organizations that do this at the moment. Start cleaning is what I would say, right? Okay, and clean, and anybody you're tagged to that has anything that you're just thinking, I don't think I'd want to show my mum or dad that, get it off as much, get anything off social media, because they, depending on the role, and actually it's not necessarily always a sales role. Like we have seen some organizations who've said to us, you're going to be meeting our customers, and our customers are, are on social media. Next thing they see you doing something, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so be very cognizant of that. And the other thing around getting references or referees, right? Okay, be very choosy about who's going to say something about you. Make sure you know the person and you actually say to them and you get their permission to be to put them down to be a referee. Because when you're asked, can we have your references, you will say yes. You know what, give me about an hour, I just want to check that their numbers are correct, if you haven't put it already in as part of the application
or
process.
Even the next day.
Even next day, I'll just come back to you when check that their numbers are correct. And you ring those people and say, do you remember you said I was going to be, I could put you down as a reference? To say yes. Well, this is the company. This is what I've told them I did with you. This is what I'd like you to say about me, if that's okay. And then you're kind of line them up, ready to go for you.
Yeah. Because what happens if you're neck and neck with the other preferred candidate and we can't divide you at interview? We'll finish at the end of the day and we'll look at the two of you and we'll say, very hard to divide them, really hard. Their marks and all the questions are even Stevens here. Let's see what the references bring. So the reference can be the tipping point between an offer or no offer. And to Gavin's point, if you leave it unstructured, they could interrupt a referee you haven't talked to in a long time, who's going into a meeting and just says, yeah, Gavin, great guy, I'm busy at the moment, I can't talk. Whereas to Gavin's point, if you ring, give them the heads up, coach them, give them the spec, give them your CV, tell them what was discussed in the interview, and when the call is going to come through, they're waiting for it and they have your documentation in their inbox and they can give you a glowing reference that can make the difference. Okay.
Finally, probation period, we discussed that. Okay, so generally speaking, it is rare that an organization doesn't have probation. It's just part of employment law, right? Okay. Okay, so I think that just brings us to the end of it, Brendan.
We have plenty of questions here now in the chat box, Gavin. If you want to open it, we could go.
Okay, I'm just going to stop recording, right? Okay, for these, right? Okay.
So we go up to Keen there. I think I'll